The research station orbited a dying star, and nobody wanted to be there except the scientists, who studied impossible things, and Claire was one of them. Because she loved mysteries more than comfort and safety combined into something reasonable. She came from Earth, where people still remembered when humanity was alone and afraid of the dark between stars, but that was before the collective found them, and offered friendship along with technology that made faster than light travel as easy as breathing. The station housed 40 humans and 100 aliens from 16 different species. And most humans tried to stay with their own kind because old habits died hard. Even after 3 generations of peace, Claire never cared about those invisible walls that others built around themselves, and she spent her days in the quantum laboratory, where reality bent sideways and sometimes forgot to come back straight. Her partner in research was named Xeraxes, but Claire called her Zyra because the full name had 17 syllables that human tongues stumbled over like drunken dancers. Zyra belonged to the Ketheri race, and they looked like someone took a human woman and reimagined her through the lens of deep ocean bioluminescence and crystalline beauty that hurt to witness directly. Her skin shifted between blue and silver, depending on her mood and thoughts, while patterns of light danced beneath the surface. Like auroras trapped under ice, she stood 7 feet tall with 4 arms that moved with independent grace, and her eyes held colors that Earth had no names for. Because they existed outside the normal spectrum, the Ketheri were known across the collective as the greatest scientists and philosophers, and they lived for 300 years while humans barely managed 80 if they were lucky. And careful Claire was neither lucky nor careful, and she was definitely falling in love with someone who probably saw her as a brief flickering candle against the long darkness of Ketheri existence. They worked together for 6 months on experiments that tried to prove consciousness could affect quantum states. And every day Claire fell deeper into feelings she could never speak aloud. Zyra would explain complex mathematics with 3 hands, while the 4th one brought her tea that she had learned to make exactly how Claire liked it. Even though Ketheri did not drink hot beverages, sometimes their hands would brush while adjusting equipment, and Claire felt electricity that had nothing to do with the quantum field generators. She learned that Zyra hummed when she was thinking hard, and the sound was like nothing on Earth, because Ketheri vocal cords could produce harmonics that made human music seem flat and colorless by comparison. Claire started staying late in the laboratory just to hear that humming while Zyra worked on calculations that would take human computers days to process. The other humans noticed, and they whispered because humans always whispered when someone crossed the invisible lines they drew between species and cultures and acceptable behavior. Her friend Marcus pulled her aside one day in the station cafeteria, where the food was bland but edible and the company was usually worse. He said that she was making a fool of herself, and that Ketheri did not form attachments to short-lived species because it was too painful. And everyone could see what Claire was feeling, except apparently Zyra herself. Claire told Marcus to mind his own business and went back to the laboratory where Zyra was studying readings that made no sense. According to any known physics, the experiment was reaching its critical phase, and they worked 18-hour days while the rest of the station slept and dreamed of home. One night when the station was silent, except for the hum of life support systems, Zyra asked Claire why humans seemed so desperate to prove they mattered in a universe that was infinite and cold. Claire thought about it while adjusting the quantum resonance chamber and finally said that maybe humans needed to matter because they knew how short their time was, and they wanted to leave something behind that said they had existed. Zyra was quiet for a long time, and her skin shifted through colors that Claire had learned meant deep thought, mixed with something like sadness. Then Zyra said that Ketheri used to think like that too, before they learned to live long enough to see stars born and die, and eventually they realized that nothing really mattered except the connections made between individual moments of consciousness. Claire felt something break inside her chest, because she understood that Zyra was telling her that their friendship was just another brief moment, and when Claire died in 60 years, Zyra would still have 140 years left to forget. The experiment succeeded 3 weeks later, and their readings proved that consciousness could collapse Quantum wave functions in ways that traditional physics said were impossible. The Collective Science Council praised their work and offered them both positions at the Central Research Academy. On the Kethery homeworld, Claire said no because she could not imagine spending years watching Zyra live her long life while Claire grew old. An irrelevant Zyra seemed confused and asked why Claire would refuse such an honor. Claire tried to explain, but the words stuck in her throat like broken glass. She said something about wanting to go home and see Earth again. Before too much time passed, Zyra accepted this without argument, and her skin went dark blue, which Claire had learned meant disappointment. They had to more weeks together before. Claire was scheduled to leave on a transport ship. Those weeks moved too fast and too slow at the same time, like quantum particles that existed in two states, until someone observed them. On the last day, Zyra gave Claire a gift, and it was a small crystal that held light inside like captured stars. She said it was a Kethery tradition to give remembrance stones to colleagues who had meant something important. Claire took it and felt tears burning behind her eyes because she did not want to be just a colleague who meant something in a professional sense. She wanted to say that she loved Zyra with an intensity that scared her and made her foolish. She wanted to say that every moment in the laboratory had been the best moments of her life. She wanted to say that she would rather have 10 years with Zyra than 100 years with anyone else, but she said none of those things. Because what was the point of confessing love to someone who would outlive you by centuries? Instead, she thanked Zyra and said that working together had been an honor. They hugged. And Kethery were not usually physically affectionate, but Zyra held Claire with all four arms, and Claire felt surrounded by warmth and light. Then Claire left and got on the transport and watched the station grow smaller through the viewport until it was just another point of light among billions. She went back to Earth and took a teaching position at the university and tried to forget, but the crystal sat on her desk, and sometimes at night she would hold it and remember the sound of Zyra humming. While working on impossible problems, 5 years passed, and Claire published papers and taught students and dated other humans who were nice enough, but none of them made her feel like Zyra had. Then one day a message came through the quantum network, and it was from Zyra. The message said that she had been thinking about their conversation, about mattering and about brief moments. It said that Kethery lived long lives, but that did not mean they felt things less intensely than humans. It said that the 240 years Zyra had left felt empty now because Claire was not in them. It said that Zyra had finally understood what Claire had been too afraid to say 5 years ago. The message ended with a question about whether Claire thought love was worth pursuing even when it would inevitably end in loss and grief. Claire stared at the message for a long time while her heart did complicated things inside her chest. She thought about Marcus telling her she was a fool. She thought about the invisible lines that people drew between acceptable and unacceptable. She thought about having maybe 60 years with Zyra versus spending those 60 years wondering what might have been. She wrote back and said yes, because some moments mattered more than others, and love was one of them, regardless of how long it lasted. 6 months later, Claire stood in a transport station on Earth with a single bag and a ticket to the Kethery homeworld. Her family thought she was crazy, and her colleagues said she was throwing away her career, but Claire had spent 5 years loving someone in silence, and now she had a chance to love them out loud. The transport lifted off and Earth fell away below, and Claire held the crystal in her hand while watching her home planet shrink to nothing. She did not know what would happen when she reached the Kethery homeworld. She did not know if 60 years with someone would be enough, but she knew that silence and safety were overrated, and that sometimes the bravest thing a human could do was love someone who would outlive them and count it as worth the inevitable pain. The stars streamed past the viewport, and Claire smiled because she was done being quiet about things that mattered.